you. Thank you. Hello. Hey, y'all. How's it going? Hi. Everyone doing okay this morning? I'm Emily. I'm one of the co-founders of the festival. Thank you guys so much for being here. Rocking and rolling, day 2. So as many of you in this room know, our social impact is very important to us, and the social impact of television and our belief in the power of storytelling is something that we value greatly here at ATX TV, and something that we showcase as much as possible whenever we can. And this year, we are so pleased to be partnering with Human Rights Watch. They're an incredible organization that are all about telling stories that need to be told and making sure people are seen, and really doing policy changes and doing good work. And they have been working to partner with more creators and creatives and producers to get those stories out there. So we're incredibly honored to be partnering with them and have them here. So we're going to play a quick clip about Human Rights Watch, and then we'll get started. So here you go. Nice. And now I'm going to bring out Priya and Francis from Human Rights Watch to do a little introduction.
Thank you, Emily. As Emily said, I'm joined by Francis Underhill and Amy Bione, and we are the Human Rights Watch film and television team. When Human Rights Watch first launched this entertainment program about 1.5 years ago, we just knew that we had to be at ATX because it turns out that TV people are our kind of people. It's true. Just like human rights researchers, TV people have the stamina and rigorous attention to detail to binge hours of footage looking for life-changing clues. TV people make the best advocates, okay? Mess with their shows and there will be a petition. And TV people believe in justice, especially when it comes to unresolved cliffhangers without a second season in sight. So Emily, Jen, Karen, Victoria, Team ATX, thank you. We are honored to be a part of ATX, and we are so lucky that our colleagues get to be envious of us going to something called TV Camp. We couldn't be more honored to partner with a best-in-class festival to celebrate and present the very first Impact of Storytelling Award to the simply outstanding Debora Cahn and the Diplomat. Debora, it is so fitting that you are the inaugural recipient of this award with The Diplomat and really an exceptional career of doing commercially compelling storytelling. You have set the bar for all of us. You never underestimate your audiences or your characters. There's a profound sense of dignity, humanity, and equality that grounds all of your work. And yet, you don't hit us over the head with it. You don't lead with big social justice issues because you don't have to. Your characters and your worlds and your stories, they speak for themselves and they entertain us with their saucy romances and their sharp action and their thriller twists and their wicked sense of humor, all while happening to explore issues that matter. You know, we're currently watching democracy itself be challenged, and one of the many forces that has led us here is a deep mistrust in the very institutions designed to protect it. Thank you for showing us that there is complexity within each public servant and the important work that they do. There are good ones, like Kate and Idra and Stuart and even Hal, and they do mess up sometimes, and they misuse CIA jurisdiction to spy on an ex-boyfriend. But who hasn't? We are going to need bold, imaginative visions for the future, entertainment that cuts through the noise and far beyond polarized news feeds. And the good news is that TV can actually meet this moment in a way nothing else can. And thankfully, we have our own ambassadors, like Debora Cahn, leading the way. Debora Cahn, thank you for showing us that culturally significant, entertainment-first storytelling is never at odds with human rights. We are honored to present you with the first Impact of Storytelling Award. Hi, guys. Debora, you want to come? You want to step onto the stage?
First of all, thank you for writing a woman who hates dresses, because as someone who always like wears pants, I really, really appreciate it. Okay, well, obviously we'll talk about The Diplomat, but you have a very long, very incredible career. So I'm gonna test your memory a little bit, and start by throwing it all the way back to like, how did you kind of like get your foot in the door?
Andy Elkin is here. He he got my foot in the door. I got a call one day that said the West Wing is looking for writers who have experience in Washington, and you worked in Washington, which was true. I had been an intern on Capitol Hill, and he said, "What did you really do there?" And I said, "I obviously opened the mail." And the congressman liked dry whole wheat toast and grapefruit, half a grapefruit, and black coffee. And I was responsible for procuring that every day. And there's one point where I, drafted a speech that was entered into the congressional record.
Yeah.
And he said, "So speechwriter." I was like, "Sure, let's go with that."
Did you ever work those details into a West Wing? Did anyone ever have half a grapefruit for breakfast?
Not yet. I will. I'm waiting for the right moment
to bring that back.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an incredible, for the West Wing to be like the start. Looking back on it now, like you hear stories of people, trying like working to get into this industry. Like when you look back on that now, are you just like amazed at that?
It's shocking. It was shocking when it was happening, and it's remained shocking.
Yeah.
And it was everything that I could have dreamed and more. I mean, I would have, and I said this to Aaron when he interviewed me, I would have like washed the coffee mugs for a living at that show. And it was this unusual opportunity where at that point he was hiring a lot of entry-level writers. We were called baby writers at the time. And it was just this wild opportunity to get in at the ground floor and, learn from the masters. And there was more than one. There was Aaron Sorkin, who was obviously unbelievable writer. And then there was also John Wells, who ran the show for the last 3 years of the series and taught me not about writing, but about producing. He has a real ethos about training writers to produce, because in television you do. It was like going to grad school in a really fun grad school.
I've always wondered, was that writer's room as like fast paced as that show was? Were you guys like batting around ideas 100 miles an hour?
It went pretty fast.
Yeah.
I found that it went really fast because I didn't know anything about politics. I was not a reader of the newspaper when I started there. Yeah. When I first went in for the interview, when Andy was like, "They actually want to talk to you," I went and looked at all the Schoolhouse Rocks again, like how a bill becomes a law. I mean, it was some entry level stuff. And there was a minute where I was like, oh, I have to be able to keep up with all these guys, because obviously they were all guys. Yep. And they all actually, they were really speechwriters and political consultants, and they had worked on the Hill for long periods of time and on campaigns. And I was just completely, I had no idea what they were talking about ever. And there was a point where I realized that they were running a race that one of them was going to win, but I should go do something else, like on the side, like do my own walking race to somewhere else. And that was helpful. And the fact that I had a lot of experience in theater, Aaron Sorkin loves musical theater. There's a lot about his writing that's about musical theater and about the rhythms of music. And so that was something that I understood a little bit better. And it kind of, once I realized there was another door to go through, that changed a lot.
Yeah. Okay, well, that brings up something I wanted to ask you about The Diplomat. It applies to The West Wing as well, which is like, how, like now, you weren't super well versed in politics then. In order to write something like The Diplomat, are you having to yourself be super well versed in this world? Do you have experts that you kind of, I know on Grey's, a lot of people have talked about sometimes they'll just write medical, and let someone fill it in. Is it that sort of kind of situation?
Sometimes even on The Diplomat, we write medical, just because all the writers know that that's sort of where I come from. And, I certainly follow the news a lot more closely than I used to, which is easier to do because now I've been at it for a while. Like it turns out, like once you've been doing it for a while, it's a lot easier to follow. Didn't understand in the first place, but also, the key that unlocked a very big door was the understanding that people like to talk about what they do, and people who do this kind of work don't get asked very often. And so they're really all happy to talk. Like, of course, like people in general are happy to, like you call anybody and you say, can you tell me all the details of your life? And they're like, well, I have 3 hours, but at least that'll get us started. People are happy to talk about what they do. And the trick that Aaron understood and taught the rest of us was, how do you take that information and turn it into entertainment? How do you turn it into a good story without losing the integrity of what it is? And, part of the answer is you lose some of the integrity of what it is. But if you can keep some pieces of it, some details of it that are recognizable that are recognizable to the people in that world, and that are recognizable when you watch it as, I don't know what that means, but it sounds like something people in that world would actually say. It creates a universe that has sort of an integrity of its own. And then you can just go tell stories about people who are having fights with their spouse.
Do you find that Diplomat fans like fact check you?
Oh, God. Yes, they do. Diplomats, nobody talks about them very much or writes about them, except like, there's cartoons of diplomats and, tuxes holding martinis or champagne. And when we first showed up at the embassy in London, they were definitely worried that that's what the plan was. But we had talked to a lot of people who had, mentored the people who were working there. There's this woman, Beth Jones, who I met working on Homeland, and she came in and was a guest expert speaker on Homeland. And I listened to her for 3 minutes and then wrote in my little notebook, she is the series. I didn't know what series it was, but I knew that she was the series, and she turned out to be really helpful all the way through the process. And she's also a person who goes out of her way to mentor people and has helped a ton of women get into that business where there had been almost zero opportunities for women in the diplomatic corps. And so you walk in the door and it's like, Beth Jones sent me, and you hear, oh, she gave me my first job, and she, sat behind me when I had to testify in Congress and taught me everything I know. So that definitely helped a lot.
Was that the origin of the idea for The Diplomat, or did you go before you met her? Were you kind of already thinking about the show?
Once upon a time, right after The West Wing finished, I developed a pilot with John Wells, and I wanted to do something about relief workers or people, Americans working in other countries was fascinating to me and still is. And I think I wanted to be one, but just didn't have the balls to. And so I wanted to write about them because I thought they were really cool. And the first idea that I came up with was, well, we should do a series about an embassy, and, London is beautiful. And that would be a way to kind of give it a little bit of something that would be fun to watch. And I pitched that, and the answer was absolutely not. Nobody's ever going to watch that. Which at the time was true. It was network television, and nobody, nor did I have the idea at that point to make it something watchable. So I thought about it for 25 years and then pitched it again. And the second time was the charm.
Were you really kind of in the back of your mind for all that time, kind of working on the show or thinking about the show?
Yeah. I I think all ideas that I have are really stupid. So not a lot of them get past my own gatekeeper. And I like the execution process. I like taking an idea and finding what's interesting and juicy about it. And but I'm not. There are idea people, there are story people, and I'm not one of them. So yeah, I had one idea. Thank God they were willing to put it on the air.
What?
And honestly, now that like Human Rights Watch has said my name, now I'm going to retire. Like that's it. I'm done. I really am. I'm.
You've got at least a couple more
like
seasons of The Diplomat.
Greatest honor I could ever imagine. I will finish The
Okay, good,
Diplomat.
thank you.
Happy to do that, but then I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go buy a place in Portugal and put my feet up.
I'm so curious, when did it finally click? You know, like you had this idea for so long, it was in the back of your head. When were you finally like, okay, this can be a series, like I can make this?
Yeah, I think at the end of season 2, I felt
great
that.
season.
There's never a point where it feels right. Like there's never, so I went to develop something with Netflix. I started working on something else that I was really sure was a good idea. And I explained it to a friend of mine. And he was like, do you like this? Because your face is sort of twisted up as you're talking about it. And I was like, I think it'll be great. He's like, that's not what I said. I said, do you like it? And I was like, no, I really hate it. So once we hit on the idea, I knew I loved the embassy idea. I knew I loved the London idea. I knew I loved the kind of how do we interact with other countries and what happens if you go beyond the we are good, they are bad paradigm. Like then what do you do? But what sort of clinched it was, okay, when I was a young person, I dated people that I worked with almost exclusively. Well, exclusively until I met my husband, who was a civilian, and I am glad that I wound up with him. And he's wonderful for a lot of reasons, but one of them is he is not in the entertainment industry. And a lot of my relationships had been that. Yeah. And we shared this thing, and like we were both passionate about it, and we were so into it, and then we were so into each other, and it was like, woo! And a lot of people I knew stayed in those relationships and married those people. And now, you know, like when I hit 15 years into my marriage and they hit 15 years into their marriages, you start to see things happen. And I felt like, you know, they have a lot of wonderful relationships, and like no shade if you married somebody you work with. It's very hot. And you share a lot, but then also you're like sleeping with one of your competitors, or you're sleeping with the person who's really bugging the crap out of you at work. Like that's hard, and it brings its own set of challenges. And I felt like, and when we started talking to real diplomats about their lives and over and over and over again. Well, you know, my wife was working with me at the time, or my husband was in the same, you know, foreign service entry-level class with me. And that's how we, you know, you hear it a lot because these are people who spend their lives every 3 years moving to a different country. So you've got to be with somebody who's up for that. And meeting somebody who does the same thing and is committed to the same thing seems like a great idea. It also seems like a great idea to be like, okay, we're going to pick a place that you have a great job. We're going to be there for 3 years. And then we're going to do me and you and me and you and me. And obviously that tends to be you more often a little bit on or exclusively on gender lines, because you have a family and then somehow you know what happens. But that tension seemed to me like a really great frame to put around the whole thing. And I think that was the difference between me pitching, hey, embassies are cool, let's do London. And hey, embassies are cool, let's do London with a person who doesn't want to be there in a relationship where this was supposed to go a certain way and it never did. And now it is. And like, careful what you wish for, that kind of thing.
I feel like we always with like cop shows or with like Grey's Anatomy with a medical show, we're talking about like built-in stakes. And I'm like, you want to talk about built-in stakes? It's like this married couple is arguing, but if one of them messes up, they cause a war, or you know what I mean? Or like, or the president dies. Like, it's like such a elevated world. Like I date someone in my industry and like the worst thing that happens is like, I don't know, I anger somebody that like might be mad at me on Twitter or something. I don't know. And it's just such a fascinating, like that world. And I think Hal and Kate and their dynamic is so interesting on its own. I would watch them if it were like Malcolm in the Middle and they were just arguing about groceries.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is like they are working at such a level and it's like, we can't talk about this because it is like top secret. I'm like, I can't imagine.
Well, I want to say thank you for saying that. And I am so grateful that that is the image that exists because it's hard to put stakes into the diplomatic life of Embassy London. And the first thing I did when I wrote the first draft of that was like utterly fail. So Alex Ganza, who's a brilliant writer, ran Homeland and was a great boss. And I asked him to read the first draft. And he read it and he said, "You have managed to make protocol interesting all the way through this 50, 60 page script. But will you ever be able to do that again?" And he was like, you're going to struggle to keep this thing alive and feel important and stakesy. And he said, I think I had a story in there about how like, maybe in 5 years, somebody wanted her to think about like running for office. And he was like, well, how about if they want to make her VP 3 months from now?
Right.
And that's like Alex Ganza's. There's a lot of reasons that there's a series that aren't me, but that conversation with Alex Ganza is absolutely one of them. He came up with the idea that really lit the fire and also made it clear that in order to be in a world where like we give a shit about having a conversation about whether or not the dress has pockets and whether or not we're making a statement online or a press release, you need the fire to be raging under that and around it in order to keep an audience.
I always give a shit if the dress has pockets.
Right?
That's good. That could be an entire show. We always care.
I mean, the thing about like, do diplomats fact check you, which I now realize that you asked a while ago, and then I answered some other question and drifted off. So one of the first, I think at the premiere of the first episode of the first season, we invited a bunch of the diplomats who we had spoken to and who helped with the show, and like in comes Carrie Russell in this white dress and she goes, "How am I supposed to wear this? It doesn't even have pockets." And you hear like 40 women go, "Yes! Oh my God, the pockets!" They were like, that's the most realistic detail that exists in the entire show.
Yeah.
And it was enough.
I am curious, like how, they spoke about how like you never underestimate the intelligence of your audience, but you guys, because like I am an idiot when it comes to like this world that you've created in my personal life. And I find it so like you guys do such a great job of balancing, you're not speaking down to me, but I can follow it. And I'm curious, like, do you guys have a lot of like internal conversations about like whether it's literal verbiage or just like the situations that your characters are in of like realistic, trust that our audience is smart, but also don't go too crazy?
So I'm so paranoid about making it, I'm so paranoid about talking down to the audience that I often like refuse to speak to the audience at all. And I'll write a script and somebody like, my amazing executive producer, Janice Williams, who is here, will read it and be like, "Such great work. This is so interesting. And I don't know that we'll know what the plot is anywhere in the script if you don't add a couple of flags that we can kind of hang on to." So, always look at when a piece of, when somebody's saying, "So what you really mean is this is going to kill him." always look for when that's happening and the person who's speaking, you're only seeing the back of their head. So that's a line that we put in later in ADR, additional dialogue recording, because we've watched the thing. And after Janice very kindly said, it's a little hard to follow, put some markers in. So just so we know what the stakes are going through. And I do that, but don't do it enough. And then we get in the editing room and I'm like, well, even I don't know what's going on. And I wrote it. And so those lines get put in, and really, like, it'll be bad if something happens with the submarine. I mean, really bad. And you're on the back of somebody's head and they seem to be having a huge emotion about the submarine, but you can't see their face. And you're like, that's such an interesting directorial choice to not be on their face when they're having this huge revelation. That's why.
So gonna change how I watch the show. I love it. I do want to talk about, because, getting your start on The West Wing, working on shows like the network model versus what you're doing now in streaming is so very different in a million ways. Is there anything you miss about the network model?
Look, there are things that are great about streaming. I have become addicted to the streaming model of, I sit down and I watch TV and I watch it like it's a movie. I watch 3-hour chunks, and I'm very upset when I can't do that. Like if I go over to HBO and they're dropping one at a time, I'm like, this is barbaric. But I also miss, being able to tell a story that people are experiencing over months and months and months. And that it just exists in the zeitgeist in a different way. The audience has some time to have their own imaginative life about the characters before you give them another piece. So it's in some ways a lot more of an active engagement. I am fortunate to be in a situation where people are actively engaging for however many hours and then prepared to wait a year, which I am very grateful for. But we are able to behave like this is a singular story going over a long period of time. And that's an amazing thing. I mean, like the amount of work that goes into movies, and somebody watches them and like 90 minutes later, they're like going to get dessert and I remember watching Syriana, which was sort of like exactly what I wanted to be doing, right? It was so good. It was so smart. It was so interesting. It was such a great film. And I remember saying that, going down like one of those really long escalators out of the movie theater and talking about it walking down the street. And then we took a right and went into this place and ordered a drink and ordered dessert. And by the time the drink came, we were no longer talking about Syriana. And I was so devastated when I realized that. Whereas people are like, Grays, like generations and generations of young people are like learning about a lot of things they probably shouldn't be learning about from Grays, but they are. And you have this engagement, like people who go back and watch The West Wing now because they're feeling like they need a little bit of positivity about government. So it's really amazing to be in that kind of novelistic, people experience it and have a relationship to the characters over a long time. It's cool to be in that paradigm.
I realized the other day that Grace has been in my life longer than Grace was not in my life. I was
my
wow. God. I know.
She's a young child.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I will take that.
And you're not old enough to be doing this.
Thank you. Do you have like a favorite, even like a line, or it could be an episode or just something that like you kind of think is like the best thing you've done?
Yes. So I'm trying to remember what season what happened. Okay, so at the end of season 2, which has been on the air, so I think I'm not ruining anything. So we made this decision. If you've never seen the show, I'm sorry, I'm going to ruin it. At the end of season 2, the president dies. Watch it, you'll still enjoy it.
Yeah.
But we came up with this idea. I came up with this idea which is very exciting. A lot of times, like the really great ideas come from other people in my writer's room, and that's why they're there, and it's really great. But people are like, oh my God, that was so cool. And I was like, yes. And the 27-year-old writer who came up with it is feeling really good about herself right now, as she should, but it wasn't my idea. So I came up with this idea that like Hal says something and the president dies. And I came up with it and I was like, that's the most stupid fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. It's like, oh, you're going to say something and he's just going to keel right over. First of all, Biden was running for president at the time when this first came up. And I was like, that's not something I want to put into the zeitgeist. But we kept wrestling with other ways to end that season. And I was like, well, this is a really stupid, super clammy idea. But we don't have a better one. And what if we just try to do like the not shitty version of it? Like, is there a way to make it not shitty enough? And I really believed that the answer was no. There was not a way to make it not shitty enough. But it was like at the end of the day, you entertain people or they're going to go do something else. Like that you have a certain responsibility to the audience to keep them awake. And so we tried it. And I went to write that scene and I was just like, oh. I was like, one thing that's going to make it less shitty is we're not going to see it. I don't want to see it happen. I don't want to see who's stammering and who clutches their throat and is there pain in the left arm. So we're not going to see it, but we're going to have to hear Hal tell Kate. We're going to have that happen on the phone so that you have two people reacting kind of not in synchronicity about this big emotional event. And then the moment that I realized it was going to be okay was when I realized that Hal, in trying to explain that he had just, without her permission, shared big information that gave the president a heart attack and then he died, he explains this event as he got really upset. And that is my favorite line that I've ever written. So what happened after you told him? He got really upset.
How much in the, like, when you write that line, are you like, yes? Or how much of it is also like when you see the delivery?
No. I was sitting on my computer like, he got really upset. Now we can do this. It's going to be okay. I think I got that. And then like I went back and started again at the beginning of the scene and went through. Like once you find something you believe in, then you go back and you just create a runway for that. So it was all about like how much information can come out before he says that. And that was one of those moments, Janice, where it was like he got really upset. And I think you said, eventually you have to say that he died. I was like, well, we're going to see on Hal's face and we're going to understand because people are going to be running. And you were like, or we won't understand. And somebody should just say, he's dead, Katie. He's dead. And if you go back and you look at the episode, the last line is, he's dead, Katie. The president died. Grace Penn is president. Because, like, I put that in stage directions, right? Grace sees all these Secret Service agents running, and she knows somewhere in the back of her mind, she realizes there's only one reason that could happen, and blackout. I didn't even want to say it out loud in the stage direction. I didn't want to be like, and now she knows she's president. I was like, no, it's too cheesy. And you can be extremely clever and come up with a line like he got really upset, but then you have to say, and then he died.
Okay, I want to make sure you guys be thinking of your questions. I will throw it to you in a minute. But that brings up, so when you bring Allison Janney onto the show, were you like, you're going to be president? Like, did you know that at that point?
No. Okay, so this is one of the great moments where one of the writers on my staff, her name is Anna Hagen. She started out as my assistant. Like, she eventually became my researcher, but she was originally in charge of sparkling or still. And then she became a researcher, and she was really good. And then she became a writer. And when we started talking about Allison, we had put in this off-screen vice president. We knew that there was a Grace Penn and that something had happened. And for a long time in the first season, we tried to figure out how to get her in and like, what was Grace Penn's story? And we were sort of like, nobody gives a shit. It's a story about the diplomat who is Kate, who is not like, that's just an off-screen inciting incident.
Yeah.
But we always sort of knew that that was in our pocket. And if we needed to pull that out, we could. And then it became clear that like Allison might be a real possibility, which also was not my idea. Ginny Howe at Netflix was like, do you want to get somebody really cool? And I was like, I hate stunt casting. It's really stupid. I'm not going to do stunt casting. And she's like, so if I got you Allison, you don't want her? And then I literally slid under the table in shame. But once that came up as a real possibility, it was like, what are we going to do that's like big enough and good enough and juicy enough? And we were like, ooh, Grace Penn lying there like a seed waiting to, and okay, so, but then what was Grace Penn going to do? And Anna came in and says, oh, it's her fault. It should all have been her fault. It was going to be the Secretary of State. God bless him. Great actor. Miguel Sandoval. But it's like, if she's coming in, it has to be her, right? Obviously. And that was very obvious to somebody who wasn't me.
Do you have like a certain season plan for the Diplomat, or are you just kind of going as you go?
There's always a plan.
Yeah.
And I am always like desperately waiting for people on my staff to come up with something better or myself to come up with something better. And we do. I mean, some things in that plan have survived. Mm-hmm. You know, you plant a lot of stuff that hopefully will blossom into something. And some of those things have been picked up and some of them have just sort of been left there, which is good because we'll keep going. But always hoping that we're going to beat it and that we're going to come up with something better. And that's what's nice about TV. You're not writing a story. You're writing a story over the course of years with the input of other writers, sure, other creative producers, directors, people who are, the actors themselves. Like, what are they good at? I thought it was going to be an ensemble show. Okay. I really did. I was like, it's going to be like West Wing and there's like 8 leads and it's going to be great and we're going to follow all of them. Yeah. I was so anxious that I didn't have something marketable that I was like, well, it's sort of Downton Abbey and it's sort of The Crown and it's sort of the West Wing. And it's like, and I sort of set myself up for all of those things to be possible. Yeah. And then episodes start coming in and it's like, every time we're not with Kate, we sort of wish we were with Kate. Mm-hmm. And, characters disappeared and storylines disappeared and stuff that was really great. But it eventually became clear that it's a show about diplomacy. It's a show about long-term relationships, but really it is a show about this marriage. Mm. And it's like a ridiculous amount of time passed before I knew that.
About your show.
Yeah. Like who, yeah. It's like you're raising a child. Like what are they going to be? Well, the only thing I knew is that mine were going to have brown hair. Like the rest, you're just sort of hoping for the best.
Amazing. All right. Does anybody here have a question for Debora? Sure. I believe we have a mic. I mean, you're right here, but we do have a mic.
Hello.
I think it will be. I just keep talking.
Keep talking?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. I work for the State Department, and I wanted to thank you so much for allowing my family to understand even a modicum of what I do now. This
is my favorite thing that ever happened in my entire life. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. As you can imagine, things are a bit of a bummer now, and especially with as you're getting a Human Rights Watch Humanitarian Award, the closing of USAID, and how do you find the balance of taking the real issues of diplomatic work, which are often a big bummer or are very complex issues that are not that easy to make black and white and make them so palatable for a mass audience?
So 8 hours of every day are spent wrestling with that question. It's harder this year than it has been before. We made the decision at a certain point that we are not. I'm not holding up a mirror. That isn't my goal, and if I was, I would be writing like a Marvel comic. Like there's no version of like the magnitude of what's happening right now that you can realistically introduce as something that would happen in fiction, and you continue to believe in that fictional world. That's so fucking crazy. That's not real. This show is like a cartoon, and like a very bad cartoon. So I can't outdo reality. What I'm looking to do is sort of find the foreign policy headspace that the country is going to be in like 18 months out when the thing's actually going to go on the air. That is always a fool's errand, trying to figure out what the world is going to look like in 18 months. But like it's now in 18 minutes, we have no idea what the world is going to look like, and what our government is going to look like, and will it still exist, and all. Is like democracy going to die before lunch? We don't know. So I'm trying to make some sort of guess about what we're going to be thinking about, and what are the issues that we're going to be grappling with. Really, what are the issues that you're going to be grappling with, and tell a story that is based around those questions. So those questions you can ask and answer in a lot of ways. And for me, what's most important is that we give some sort of insight into what are the arguments that you're having with your colleagues. You all agree on the same basic principles. You all come from the same value system. You all have the same set of goals, and I have no doubt, argue vehemently with each other about what will absolutely succeed and absolutely fail at every step of that journey, because what you're doing really matters. So the stakes are really high no matter what the conversation is, pockets or not pockets, right? You control what you can control, and sometimes it's really big. Yeah. Like, are you going to try and take down a president? Well, Marie Yovanovitch had to answer that question for herself. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's like, what can we put duct tape over so that we look like we know what we're doing, so that the president looks like the president, like so that our country looks like we know what we're doing. So those issues and the things that you're arguing about, and the lines, like where the lines are drawn, that's what I'm looking for.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great question. Anybody else? Oh yeah, sure. Let's go to the middle back. I'm making your life as difficult as possible.
Thank you. Hi, Deborah, and thank you for that very honest response. It's something that I think we're all contending with. I developed a show about the United Nations, a half-hour comedy, based on my 10 years of working in the organization. I'm happy to be quitting very soon, thank God, and to be pursuing TV full-time. Because I want to touch people more directly on their screens, which I think is the way to go about it. I'm also, I grew up in the Arab world, so I want to talk about it from my Middle Eastern background. As a beginner writer, something that I'm contending a lot with when talking to potential producers, agents, managers is I'm being told that political shows like mine don't have a space in the industry right now because buyers and audiences, they believe, are craving escapist television. Whereas when I look at my community, when I look at people around me, people in this room, the world is breaking. We want to talk about it. And so what would be your advice about navigating some of those conversations? And I genuinely don't find anything more interesting than politicians. They're so ridiculous and hilarious. It's hard for me to like write about boyfriends or whatever, you know? So I guess what would be your advice on that? And you touched on this a little bit in your first answer, but has the changing global landscape over the last 2 years changed the kind of conversations and debates you have inside the writer's room? Or are you, like you said, really focused on what you think the audience will be dealing with in 18 months or
every day?
Yeah.
I mean, the target moves every single day. And we argue about what's going on, and we argue about whether we should be arguing about what's going on or whether we should be on, like, the show should be on its own. Write about boyfriends. No, I pitched this show as a show about an embassy 20 years ago, and very politely, I was told to fuck off. So there wasn't a show until I was able to say, like, okay, it's about a marriage, and like they got together and it was like so hot and so passionate, but now there's like this rift between them. And where did it come from? Did he make a decision that she didn't like? Is she conducting her career in a way that he thinks is stupid?
Yeah.
It's all about, I sold the marriage. I sold location porn because all of the diplomats that I wanted to be writing about were doing work in the Middle East. They were not like, those were the, Beth Jones, who I call the superhero in a pantsuit, Pakistan, Jordan, Baghdad, Beirut. That's where you and I have a lot of the same interests. Jewish girl trying to figure out what the hell we're doing all over the place. And you have to find ways to sell it that aren't that. Like, I went and interviewed, I had a conversation with Anne Marie Slaughter at one point, and I came back and I talked to somebody at Netflix, and I was like, oh my God, the story ideas that are out there for us about the move from a unipolar world to a multipolar world are unbelievable. And then there's this long pause. And she says, but entertaining. And I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, I can't tell you that because, I don't want to ruin it. And then I was like, what the hell am I going to, you have, like, fun. Yes, it is about the boyfriends. Yes, it is about, Homeland was like, I wrote a season set in Kabul, and I sat on a roof in a bombed out building outside Casablanca, and it was 6:00 in the morning, and we had found this set where the exterior was as fucked up as the interior of Carrie Matheson's mind. There was like destruction and death everywhere. And I watched Claire Danes and Mandy Patinkin do this scene that I had written, which is always like an unbelievable honor to see that happen. And it was really cold. And I was like, there's no reason this scene couldn't take place on the set of The Crown. And if it was on the set of The Crown, I would be more comfortable. And so would the audience, right? So when I was writing for Homeland, I worshipped that show. People loved that show. But all of the people who worshipped it and loved it also said, I had to take a break for a year because it was a lot. And I felt like there was an audience that watched The West Wing because we had a concert with Yo-Yo Ma. We put CJ in a dress. There were people who watched it for that and were able to learn a ton, get interested in the government, in all of this stuff that was, there was you just want to make the water a little warmer so it's easier to slide into it. So yeah, beautiful locations. London has beautiful locations and actors with adorable accents. And it was all about looking for, like, you have to let go of everything you know. Like, it. The stories that you want to tell about the work that you do, you have to stop telling. They'll come back, but it's baked in already, right? You're done. So, I mean, Rami, who I absolutely worship, like he's talking about his irritating parents and his dating life. And that has been one of the most successful pieces of entertainment about talking about what does it mean to be Arab American in this culture? Like, he doesn't have to break those stories, and you don't have to break those stories. You just have to figure out some adorable, sexy, tragic way to convince people who are going to give you millions and millions of dollars. Like, they share those values. They really do. You know, like, people talk a lot of shit about studio executives. They are smart, creative people who have like our interests, like their heart's in the right place, but like they got to sell a product, and it is expensive, and you need to tell them, you need to prove to them that they are safe in your hands. You're not going to forget anything that you're trying to really talk about. So stop worrying about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Sure.
Maybe not right now, but before we all break up, can we get a photo of you holding the award?
Yes.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Want to come up here? Perfect.
Hi. I'm Kimberly.
Hi, Kimberly.
Love the Diplomat. I'm curious. Your story at the beginning. Why were you interning for a congressman? Did you want to be? But yet you said you didn't pay attention to politics that much. Like, what brought you there? What was your goal for your career?
I was interested in theater. I was passionate about theater. I had been involved in theater my whole life. It's the only thing I cared about. So obviously, I only dated theater directors. And my boyfriend in college got an internship working at the Folger Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C., and I didn't think I would live without him for the summer. So I called everybody I knew who knew anybody in Washington, and I got a job.
Wow. And quickly, I'm wondering if you're influenced at all by the TV show Madam Secretary.
I was not a watcher of Madam Secretary because it was after the West Wing shows that were set in that environment. I just
You had to step away.
yeah. It's like it was like it's going to the office it's not an entertainment. So I don't know a lot about the show. I was reassured that it existed and that there was a way to tell these stories and survive on TV. But yeah.
Amazing. All right. I think we're at time. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank
all of
you. Thank
Yeah.
you guys. Thank you so much. And thank you.